Iran is seriously degraded. I mean, certainly they've done a lot of damage to the senior command, and I think at a what do you know at a level of morale, Iran is not looking good. When you have millions of your citizens fleeing the cities, those incredible pictures overnight of tailbacks in Tehran as the population try to leave.
Israel says it has conducted several extensive strikes on military targets in Iran overnight. It also claims to have killed the chief of staff of Iran's armed forces, Ali Shadmani. Explosions have been heard over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem after Iran launched a new wave of missiles as well. The US President Donald Trump left the G7 meeting in Canada early last night, but he says his departure had nothing to do with working on a ceasefire deal. Tom, it seems impossible to know what he meant by that, whether he meant it's nothing to do with working on a ceasefire deal because he's working on something that's bigger and better than a ceasefire deal, or he's just working on, who knows, his new phone network.
He just wants to go home. He's got a new phone. He's, Jimmy Carter the fool got rid of his peanut farm when he became president, but he's just launching a $500 phone. No, I mean, it's impossible to pass. It's a fool's game. We can do this Kremlinology, Trumpology, but, Britain just got a deal because he likes us. So
yeah, well, that's nice. The fact that he's giving us a trade deal because he likes us. Yes,
yeah, the whole world. I mean, look, we're I think a bunch of metropolitan liberals. We sneer as well as the best of them. You're even from North London.
I'm not from North London. I just live in North London.
Well, yeah. Spiritually. So we're meant to be conscious of that and say that obviously we need to understand the things, but it's lunacy. The world's lunacy. This is mad. He's just said, like, when in the history of diplomacy would you have someone saying, "You've got one, I like you, I'm going to go and launch my phone." So, yeah. But we are where we are, and we've all got to suck up.
Super. Let's find out about all that in a little bit more detail. Let's bring in the Times' foreign correspondent Richard Spencer. Hello, Richard.
Hello, I'm the fool who has to pass this, I think.
Yes, well, look, I think we're in safe hands. I hope we're in safe hands. Look, let's just take this from the top, Richard. How close are we to understanding what Israel's goals are in this war? Why they're even conducting it?
Yeah, I mean, I think their goals are pretty clear as stated. I mean, they want to degrade the Iranian nuclear program. As you suggest, there's a bit more to it than that because, most assessments are that you cannot simply, certainly with the resources Israel has available, bomb Iran into submission and destroy every facet of its nuclear program so that it can't be rebuilt. So if that's the case, I mean, some Israeli analysts tell me that they do believe they can do that they do believe they can effectively destroy the program. But most analysts say they can't. So the question is, what then? I mean, my feeling is that Netanyahu would be happy to declare victory if he'd, put the program back by a couple of years and done such damage that the authorities in Iran decided that they couldn't just, go back to how things were before. I mean, I think that's probably Netanyahu's number one goal. Then there are these other possible goals like regime change, which isn't a declared goal, but is something that Israel wouldn't be unhappy to see. And there's the other option, which is what we think Trump may be thinking about, certainly is thinking seriously about, is trying to get America to join the war. Because then if you have a joint Israel-US attack on Iran, then you can do obviously a lot more damage. You can take out the nuclear facilities almost certainly in their entirety. Well, not almost certainly, but a much bigger chance. And of course, then you also have a joint Israel project to reshape the Middle East, which Israel and America periodically try to do, as we know.
Well, let's take a couple of bits of that in turn. Firstly, the idea of regime change, which one would imagine Israel wouldn't be averse to regime change in Iran, particularly if Iran was going to be a sort of a lovely, secular, liberal democracy. Presumably, there would be a bit of wariness about, I mean, because, the track record of trying to bring about regime change in the Middle East does tend to lead to a sort of at least a period of kind of sort of slight failed statiness. And presumably, would Israel not rather deal with the relative stability of Iran today than another Syria, another Libya, another Iraq that was the size of Iran?
I mean, I think the answer to that is actually no.
Right.
Amazingly to say, from the perspective of a post-Iraq war Britain, Firstly, they would, the serious people would say, well, there's no comparison between Iran and Iraq. Iraq has this sectarian divide that caused a massive civil war and blah blah blah. Iran has a whole load of different traditions, but has a much stronger history as a unified state. And it would be much simpler to put in a regime that was more favorable to the interests of the West, as was the case before the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So there is actually, a surprisingly strong faction of people in Israel and indeed in Washington who think that's the case.
Right.
And those are the people who Benjamin Netanyahu is allied to. So you can't rule out that serious possibility. Then, the experience of Syria hasn't been so bad for Israel. The chaos in Syria of the civil war and then the overthrow of Assad has weakened the opposition to Israel from that neighbor, that once very powerful neighbor. So again, that doesn't look too bad. You'd rather have your enemies weak and divided than strong.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm afraid there's hard calculations at work here that don't necessarily go along with the idea that we have in Britain that regime change must be terrible for everyone.
How weakened is Iran right now? I mean, because we know that there have been significant killings of top Iranian generals and so on, but Iran is still firing missiles at Israel. Is there much more Iran can do? Is there sort of the military might of Iran at full capacity, or could it, could they unleash a bigger counter-assault should they wish to?
Yeah, well, there are some people who are still holding out to the idea that Iran has held back its worst, that it's waiting until Israel sort of expends its Iron Dome and David Sling missile defense systems, that it uses up its interceptor missiles, and then will come in with the big guns and really start to do damage to Israeli cities. That's one view, but the more likely idea is that Iran is seriously degraded. I mean, certainly they've done a lot of damage to the senior command, and I think at a at a level of morale, Iran is not looking good. When you have millions of your citizens fleeing the cities, those incredible pictures overnight of tailbacks in Tehran as the population try to leave. I mean, that does not look good for any regime, even if this regime has shown that it's quite willing to use force to stay in power, which it would do again. But the chance of chaos rather than a clear outcome one way or other are increasing.
Yeah, well, look, moving away from that conflict in particular, Richard, you've also written about how the growing use of artificial intelligence in military planning generally could increase the risk of nuclear war. It's a warning from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. What are they worried about? How's that going to work? What's the fear there?
Yeah, this is a well-timed report, really. I mean, nothing specifically to do with the Middle East, except insofar as it does touch on nuclear arsenals, which Israel has, and according to Israel, Iran is keen to get. But it does sort of add to this concept that we are living in a very dangerous world at the moment, where the certainties of the Cold War have been replaced not by the belligerent certainties of the Cold War have not been replaced by peace, but by uncertain belligerences. It looks. This is the annual report of the Stockholm Institute. It's the sort of leading independent analyst of nuclear stockpiles around the world. It talks about the fast-growing Chinese arsenal. They've increased their number of warheads from 500 to 600. They've pointed out how Russia and America are now modernizing rather than allowing their nuclear arsenals to fall away, which happened immediately after the Cold War. Big reduction in nuclear missiles, nuclear warheads after the Cold War, but that's now come to a halt. They're both rearming their nuclear arsenals. The last remaining strategic arms limitation treaty, New START as it's called, expires in February. No sign of Putin and Trump renewing that one. To add into the mix, it gives this warning about how artificial intelligence adds yet a new uncertainty into the mix. I mean, to put it simply, we all know the case of that Soviet colonel who saw nuclear missiles heading on his computer screen to Russia back in the early 80s and took the unilateral decision that he thought the computer was wrong and that he wasn't going to do anything about it, thereby averting nuclear Armageddon. And it turned out he was right, the computer was wrong. What the SIPRI report says, well, what happens if you have artificial intelligence there? Would it make the same decision? And even if, as one sincerely hopes, you're not just allowing artificial intelligence to take decisions of life and death and love and war, and there are humans involved, does artificial intelligence speed up the decision making so much, that there is this intense, need to react quickly and make those humans, like the good Soviet colonel, react more out of panic and less out of considered thought?
Cheery, cheery, cheery. Thank you very much indeed, Richard Spencer. Richard is, of course, Times' foreign correspondent. Tom Whipple, I've still got you here. But let's tackle that AI point first. I mean, it's obviously the military are going to use AI in order to not to be outpaced by rivals who are using AI.
Yeah, I remember 5 years ago we had these debates about how we had to make sure there was always a human in the loop. And when the people were talking in this sci-fi terms about these killer drones that would one day roam our skies, and these would use AI, but you would always have a human making the kill decision. I think you look at Ukraine now and realise that's not going to happen. That's sort of Operation Spider's Web, where they trained them all on the AI of the bombers. Realistically, AI is going to be there. So, what's it going to be doing with nuclear? I mean, with nuclear, you would hope that there would always be a human again at the end of the decision. My concern, and the concern of lots of people now who sort of in the field, is that we're losing this thing that's called the nuclear taboo, which was this concept that was created, this idea like cannibalism. It's just something you don't do. Now, you don't have discussions with yourself, there's a dead body, that's a different sort of cannibalism. You're just like, no, cannibalism we don't do. And with nuclear, there are forms of nuclear strike that actually wouldn't be too bad. A tactical nuclear weapon on the battlefield in Ukraine might kill less people than in a normal day. A tactical nuclear weapon uses a bunker-busting bomb to get rid of the Iranian nuclear program. You could see how you could justify it, but we just don't do it. And that seems to be breaking down. And then you end up with a nuclear war, which having said, some nuclear strikes aren't that bad, nuclear war is bad.
Those ones are bad.
It's really bad.
Look, while I've got you, on that subject of the bunker-busting bombs, of the fact that the Iranian nuclear infrastructure being inside mountains, I know this isn't particularly your area of expertise, but I also can't think of a man in the Times I'd rather ask. How hard is it to blow up a mountain?
It's pretty hard, and actually that's why there are tactical nuclear weapons that are used for this. Bunker-busting bombs are really simple in concept. You have something really, really hard. I think the first ones they used artillery tubes, and then you have it really heavy, and then you make it go really fast.
Right.
It really is
That's
no more
simple.
complicated
Really
than
heavy,
that.
goes really fast. Well, that's science for you.